Hello and welcome to the third episode of the GamesCreed podcast. My name is Andresplays. I'm your host. I'm an editor at GamesCreed. I write video game reviews and news articles. And as always, I have a very special guest today, Westen, aka BigNerdGaming. Hello.
Hey Andres, how's it going, man? Happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm very happy to have you here, man. It's been a while since the last one, and I'm very glad to have you here because there's a lot of things that we have in common. About many different games that we play in our rotation, many different genres, and we also like think a lot about games and write a lot about games too, right? Like, 'cause you have like a blog, Big Nerd Gaming.
Yeah, you might put out more content than me, man. You're a workhorse with some of those reviews. But yeah, I get I do BigNerdGaming.com. I do 2 posts a week, Tuesdays and Fridays. So just I'll talk about whatever I'm playing or just if I have something that strikes me. So it's yeah, I'm super pumped to talk video games. That I know we're gonna talk some Harold Halibut and indies today, and I'm
Yeah.
very passionate about indie games. But you're really passionate about indie games, but I'm pretty passionate, too. So it'll be a good conversation.
Yeah, because I remember like I've always loved video games, and my job has given me that flexibility because it's from home and stuff like that. But last year when I started writing reviews for this outlet, that's when I had to become a little bit more effective with the video games that I play because I played like 60. Like that was like it was a lot. 2023 was a huge year for games and many landmark games, right? Like Zelda and Final Fantasy and all of those games, but also a lot of great indies. You also wrote a really interesting article that I saw about like
Yeah.
your 10 what favorite games that have like 70s on Metacritic, right?
Yes. Yeah. 76 or under. Inspired by Rise of the Ronin, which I really liked, which was at 76, and then now Harold Halibut as well, which I believe is only at like 71, which is
Wow.
pretty shocking to me.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I guess that's a good segue into the topic of today, the video game that we're talking about, which is Harold Halibut, which I wrote a review for our the sister company of GamesCreed, which is called Noob Feed, um, which I'm really, really glad that I got the chance to review because normally I get 5 days to a week at the most to review a game, which is like not a lot of time. If you're talking about like a big RPG, these games take like what, 20, 30 hours. I sleep late trying to play it and write about it. But in the case of Harold Halibut, I had it like since early April. Like the review embargo came out on the what 14th or something. So like I did have like 2 whole weeks to really dig into it, play it at my own pace, which is something that I think that is really important in this game, right?
Yeah, I did not play it that way. I slammed through it. Well, I think the first 2 chapters I took some breaks. So, and I could see. I think getting through
Yeah.
those chapters. I think if you try and rush through them, I don't think it's good for you. There's a lot of meandering. There's a slow pace. There's a lot of slow character introductions, and just it. Harold walks kind of slow. He's not the fastest walker in the world. So, um, I think after there was a little bit in the first 2 chapters where I was like, okay, I'm gonna switch to something else. I'm gonna turn on Rise and Ronin and just kill some stuff, make this go a little
Yeah.
faster. And then chapter 3 hit for me, which is when I really felt drawn in for a lot of different reasons. And I know we're gonna kind of dive into each section, but that's when I actually honestly just that was all I played until I finished it. So I had beat the game I think in like 5 or 6 days. But the way you played it does sound appealing. But I do think once you get to a certain point, it can be tough to put down once the plot really gets going.
Yeah, yeah. What I was gonna say is about like to give a bit of a preamble of what Harold Halibut is and how to play it, because you were saying about how you played it a little quicker than in my 2 weeks time. I think that a Netflix series or a good video game that they say like, oh, it's gonna click at about like the third episode or like by hour five or something like that. I think that Harold Halibut, I think it was like that for me as well because I remember it is a slow game, right? And I remember playing it for the first hour and being like dazzled by the art style and how everything worked. Like, oh, I think this could be like a really great game. And then we get to the really slow part of the game before all the mystery that's alluded to really happens. So I think that that's when I like it could be a 9, it could be an 8, and then it picked pick the pace up again, and that's when I eventually gave it a 10.
I was actually just listening to my friend Julian Titus
Yeah.
on his show Stage Select, and he was actually talking about he's only through chapter one,
Mm,
and he was talking about how he's going to be taking it very slow, and
yeah.
he was having a hard time too with chapter one, and he said something that made him click was actually looking at the achievement list, and it is pretty interesting. I hadn't thought about it in this way, but there's an achievement which I'll admit I didn't get um, to play the game for over 15 hours. There's also an achievement to watch the TV show, the
Telenovela, yeah, soap
Turkish
opera, yeah.
thing, like yeah, for like 10 minutes. Like the game really does want you to take your time. And there's some cool there. I mean, there is like when you really start exploring the ship and like certain like kind of side activities are really fascinating. I mean, there's one involving the postal service that if you haven't played, I feel like you haven't actually experienced the game. You know, like if you skip that, you literally skipped like 5 of the 10 best moments in the game.
The Postman side quest. Oh my god, I love that side quest. Um,
Yeah, it starts. Are we going spoilery here at all? Not really. Trying to avoid that.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, there's a side quest where you deliver these letters, and where you read some old ones, and it's just like really fascinating look into the ship, and some of them are very happy, some of them are very sad, and some of them help develop some of the characters on the ship that you're meeting, and it's I mean I just really I almost can't believe it's a side quest. Like you kind of I feel like you have to play it.
Yeah, I really can't imagine like someone missing it, right? Like now that you put it in perspective like that, I mean it's really important to the overall plot, to and I wrote that in my review, like the world building, how they talk about like the time they were in space trying to get to
Right.
a planet that they were stranded in. They did say that like they explore different planets, that they connect with alien life forms, and they just have this sense of traveling through space for the first time in human history. So I think that combined with the human emotions that are also human stories that are also like written down there.
And that part isn't 100% what like got me into the game, but it definitely helped
Yeah.
like me go, okay, there's something here. And I think part of it is that even though obviously you're on a spaceship, you're underwater, there's a weird tube system. Like it's science fiction, but Harold's life is very like mundane. I guess it didn't feel like science fiction early on. Like I felt like it was just he's just living a normal life. And once they start expanding on the world in that way, I started like just feeling those science fiction elements come through, and that gets even more expanded on once you get to the second half of the game. But that is a big part of what made me go, okay, I got to see this dude. There's some special stuff here.
Yeah, of course. I mean, and I think we can talk a little bit about this because it's like in the trailer and all of that. I mean, when he meets Wii, this alien life form, and they first start communicating through like drawings on a children's book, and then actually
Mm-hmm.
slowly becoming friends, right? I think it's just a story a lot about like friendship and finding your place in the world and all of that. And I think that I was looking at the whole process of this game. It was 14 years in the making and all of that, but 6 years ago, I believe they launched their Kickstarter project. And they had already been working on it, like on Harold and on all of the other characters, and for 2 years already. So I don't know, to see how like the patience from the developers' part, right, to work on a game for so long, and obviously the way it had evolved, and in the beginning it looked really mysterious, like it settles more on the mundane and leaves like the surprising, interesting parts of the sci-fi elements much more, as you said, to the second part of the game. But it takes a while to get going, I think, too.
Yeah, it's a slow burn, and it's on purpose, and I do think some of the slow burn elements are actually pretty important to the plot, pretty important to Harold's character and decisions he ends up making. So it does come back, I mean, they want you to feel immersed in this ship, in this world, and I mean, like you said, I mean, they put tons of time into this game. I mean, they put a lot of care. You can you can feel their heart. I feel like in this game, like you can. I'm sure most game developers pour their heart to the game, but
Of course.
it just feels like a much more vulnerable video game than most I've played. Which is, when I wrote my review for it, I think one of the things I wrote about is like when I beat the game, I actually started thinking about the developers and just like
Yeah.
how they must have felt when this came in the world and how nervous they must have felt when those reviews dropped. And once again, I know every developer probably feels that way, but I really thought about it more, I think, because of just how vulnerable this video game is.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. As we just talked a moment ago, I've been listening to like a few more podcasts from actors, and I listened to this podcast from Ben Starr, Clive from Final Fantasy 16,
Ah,
this
yeah.
actor, and he said something like really important and really special that relates to what we're talking about, because he says like video games, you spend so much time and he's talking about Final Fantasy like 8 or you spend a lot of time with these characters in these worlds, and it's he feels when he finishes one of these long games, long emotional games, that's when he wants to talk to the developers to thank them, to connect with them. And I think it relates a lot to Harold Halibut's story, because it's really vulnerable, as you say, like that. The way the small little details from some side quests, the secrets that every character kind of has, that like you don't really need to, that doesn't really like add too much to the overarching plot, but it's there. I remember one of the suggestions for reviewers was that every day try to like look around the different sectors of the ship to try to find something new, and I always did find something new. Like some guy was singing in the shower, and then in another one there were like these kids doing the poetry slam, right? These things like really didn't add anything or move forward the plot, but they were still special
Yeah,
to the game, I
yeah.
think.
I think I missed this one. It might have been you that posted it, but there's like some stage performer, and like I totally missed that. But I mean, said if you take your time, there's cool stuff, and it's actually some of that stuff's actually some of the funniest moments in the game too. Like the poetry slam thing is actually a really hilarious sequence because it's just
Yeah.
these teenage kids reading this like emo poetry, like super hipster kids, and then but then I start talking to like the adults that are watching, and then some adults like, so you're just like watching these kids read poetry? Are you really into poetry? Harold's like, not really. It's like, oh, you're kind of a creep. It's like, so it's yeah, there's it, as vulnerable and at times sad as the game can be. It is actually a lot funnier than you'd think, but I do think a lot of the humor is kind of tucked away in some of those. I mean, it's there in the main plot too, but some of the funniest moments are just kind of tucked away in random spots that for you to discover.
Yeah, yeah, I remember because Harold, like, it's this handyman that really, it's not that he's like dumb or anything, but like he really he doesn't show any interest towards science, and he's working with scientists, right? And I remember in one of the sequences, he's talking with one of the scientists from the friend of Dr. Moreau, right? The one who they're always debating, and he starts talking for like a whole minute about how the spaceship is going to work, and the energy that to provide fuel and whatnot, and like you can just see Harold like spacing out in real time, and seeing the other character being like, "Ah, okay, you know what, Harold, just bring me this, man, like just go do your thing, like why did I even bother, you know what I mean? It's I don't know, it's funny.
Yeah, they sneak a lot of that stuff in there. It's a sneakily funny game for sure. Um, Definitely, and it's funny. I don't even think I talked about that in the review. It's like just talking with you about it. I'm like reflecting, like that game did make me kind of chuckle, at least more than I even remember in the moment. But
Yeah.
that's the stuff. Yeah, there's like it's like a dry humor most of the time, or kind of bizarre. But
It is. I don't know if you. Sorry to interrupt. I don't know if you remember. What was the series? Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I remember that movie. Well, also a book, right? This English
yeah, it
movie.
started as a
Like
book.
it really like that kind of like humor where it's like yeah, like dry humor or like English humor, and it's a bit strange, right? Because I mean, yeah, the voice actors are all English, um, but the game is actually German, right? So I find it interesting that they really, got that humor. I think that it's very English in that way. Like it's the way they just brush off each other or criticize or like are sarcastic all of the time. I think most of the answers are very sarcastic, really.
Yeah, it's like a lot of the funniest parts are like this is a pretty early thing, and I've heard people talk about it, so I'm not sure if it's not too much of a spoiler, but really early on in the game, you discover that because they left Earth, because they thought Earth was done for,
Hmm.
and they just get a random transmission, and it's like super awkward and funny. He's just like, yeah, so turns out Earth didn't get destroyed, and we just kind of figured it out. So, but you guys probably made the right decision at the time. And it's just like, but yeah, we're okay. So then it's just kind of like, it's just that kind of delivery. It's just really, I think it's funny because I
Yeah.
wrote a whole review and I thought a lot about the game, and I honestly didn't even think much about the humor. But as I reflect, it's really tucked in there. It sneaks up on you, little gut punches.
Yeah, I feel very, excited for my review to be seen by the developers. I'm very happy that like they like retweeted it. Some of the voice actors even like said some things. Like, and I remember you saw it, and I always feel a little bit wary when I'm really enthusiastic about a game because like I know that like for me especially like it hit, but there's several reasons because of that. I might have been going through something like emotionally at the time, or like the music, like that sequence with that song called "Time Moves Slow" that I've known that song for years already, so like to know the lyrics and to hit especially in that moment where you're not expecting licensed music in an indie game, right? I think that's like that was something really unexpected for me. Paired with what was happening in the story, I was just in shambles.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's always a little bit. It's not that I'm like overprotective. I mean, of course, I saw some people be like, "Well, 4 out of 10. This should have been a movie." Like well, okay, like I get where you're coming from. But I'm glad that like you and others like resonated and even taking me for like being so vocal about this game because it's all of these little things that add up to making it a like a special experience, right?
Well, takes like yours are important with any game. I mean, I actually wrote another article recently saying like 7 out of 10s are good video games, right? Like Harold Halibut,
Yeah,
I mean, most review scales consider seven. They say good, right? So there's a lot of games that get eights and nines because there's so many good video games. So I understand why people think a seven is an attack, um, but I mean, Harold's at a seven basically at Metacritic, but there's going to be people that play it and just you're not in the right mood. It's not your kind of thing. You might think it's like a five, but then there's going to be people like you have it at 10. I have it an 8.5. Like it's we all have different tastes and different things that appeal to us.
of
And
course.
yeah, to go back to the music, I mean that's another one. Like I was talking about like, how the humor kind of sucker punches you out of nowhere. Like the music really does too. Like just out of like you're kind of just doing something, then all of a sudden the cutscene hits and it slows down, or there's a montage, and this music plays, and it all blends perfectly with just the tone and it's all kind of I don't want to say strange, but I guess it is. It's
Hmm.
different music. It's not normal stuff. So
The special soundtrack made especially for the game outside of the licensed music. I really would like to like have own the soundtrack someday because it's really like the I don't know subtle pianos or like sounds that sound otherworldly. They do it in a right way, and obviously also now that you said that I think like really hits to make you reminisce about what happens in a chapter, right? The cutscenes when the music's really taken over, and you see like all of these little things that days pass by, and Harold like starts. I don't know. For example, when Wii is trying to like recover from when they met, how they show that like he's just talking to her and like grabbing her hand to do a high five, like silly things like that. Like Harold is like developing as a character in real time in these cutscenes.
yeah, no, it transitions things perfectly. Kind of reset because like each chapter is kind of its own episode, but obviously it all is totally connected. But it's a kind of the perfect way to end things and make you think about what just happened. And they all end in like like I believe one of them ends off a conversation with the one professor where she just starts talking about failure with Harold, and it's like actually a really that was a conversation. That was another one where I was like, I got to stick with this because there is some cool stuff here. That one where he just kind of just randomly talks about failure with Harold, and it was like, damn, these are like some good, just general life lessons.
Yeah, you said it right. There's a few sequences in their conversations. I think that the writing, obviously, as the game said, I remember the developers, they saw some of the reviews on Steam that erroneously thought that because it's a story-based game, there was going to be puzzles, because that is something that usually comes together with a story-based game, right? There's always puzzles, and because in Harold Halibut there's really just a whole lot of story. That's obviously that's its main strength. That alongside the art direction, as you said in your review as well, that it's the art direction of the year. I think between that and the story, like the writing, I have several like on my PlayStation. I have a few conversations recorded because I was like, wow, like they just talked about something, and I'm like, I wanna keep this for future me. Like maybe someday it can help me out, like this sort of life advice, really.
Yeah, I think the game can connect with people in multiple ways. As I said, you have to be in the right mood.
Yeah.
I think to play it, or you at least have to have a certain level of patience. And for me, I think those glimpses we've talked about the first, just those kind of random funny moments, the random deep moments. That's the stuff that made me go, okay, I can't give up on this. But it was the art direction too. I mean, the early art direction when you're just on the ship, it can get a little old after a while because you're
Hmm.
seeing the same stuff over and over. But whenever I'd take a break and boot it up the next day, I'd kind of be back in awe of like, wow, I can't believe they managed to do this. And that alone is cool. But as the game goes on, there's even more like impressive things pulled off where they actually really expand things in ways I never expected.
Yeah, I was thinking a lot, and obviously, to not spoil anything, we can just like speak in general terms of this. But like I remember the dream sequence, right, in chapter 5, so to speak.
That's trippy.
That was your mind blown the whole time. Obviously, I think each person, like the way how they're feeling, as you say, like the current mood that you're in, and all of these feelings. I think that they're gonna get something different out of it, right? You can say like, oh, this sequence or this thing that Harold said, or I can look at it at a different way. I think that's a very surreal thing that they really like stretched out the limits of imagination. I think, and obviously of the artistry.
That sequence, I think, is where I said obviously without going too deep into it, but that's I think that chapter, that area is where why talk about this game being so vulnerable because it like really dives into Harold's psyche in a way that's like whoa, like this is some deep stuff. It's it's a special game. I mean, do I think the first chapters could have been better? Yeah, but I said in my review, it's like when I think about this game years from now, I'm going to think about leaving the ship the first time and that sequence and the ending. I'm going to think about the ending for a long time. Like,
Yeah.
I don't, as I get further away from the game, those are the parts that are going to stick with me. And I'm not going to think about, oh, it was a little slow to start as much. And that's, if you play the game and you're not feeling it, I think playing the way you did and like kind of maybe spacing out your playthroughs because I did notice every time I stopped playing too, and then I picked up the next day. I was kind of back in awe again for a little bit of just that they pulled it off, and that gives you a little more time to maybe explore and not get worn down on it. But I do think once the plot really grabs you, you'll probably be in it till the end because there's enough stuff that keeps you like, oh, what's going to happen next? There is that intrigue as well
Yeah.
to go with the character development and all that.
Yeah, definitely. I just feel like really lucky that I found you to talk about this game, really, because as I said, I gave it like my first 10/10. I've reviewed over 40 games by now of all different genres. Simulation games, shooters, third person action adventure, many kinds of genres, and obviously I think that and I said that recently, like whenever I start playing a new game, I try my best to keep an open mind and to hope for the best. Obviously I want all games to succeed, to all be 10, which is obviously impossible, but I always try to take a step back and not be muddled by what I don't know, played before, right? Or have an expectation of what it's going to be, because I think that can really make my experience worse because of my own perspective, you know. But I guess we can talk about now about like indies as a whole, if you don't mind, because I think you also play like indies for a little bit.
Oh yeah, every I said this recently. Like if you're not playing, well, I have a lot of takes on indie games. But oh, and one thing I will say too, real quick to wrap up with Harold is just like I do think when you're like doing content creation, you're reviewing a game, it's a weird thing because
Hmm.
sometimes now because of the blog, I want to before I put something out in the public sphere, I truly want to give it every chance in the world, and I've definitely stuck with a few games that were not doing it for me,
Yeah,
and I'm like, all right, let's. But with hair, but then sometimes it goes the other way where it's like, I don't know if I wasn't doing the blog, I don't know, maybe I would have put Harold down a little longer, but I was like, no, I want to write about it. Let's give it a little longer. So, very very glad that I'm doing this blog because who knows if I would have made it. But
true.
if you haven't played it yet and you're starting, just get to chapter 3. If you're in chapter 3 and you're not getting enamored with the world, maybe it might not do it for you at that point. But I think for a lot of people it will.
I agree. You heard him.
If you're not playing indie games, like in my view, like you're just, I mean, I'm not saying you're not a gamer, but you're not truly experiencing like the best that video games has to offer. Like I play tons of indie games every year, and most years I probably have 3 to 4 indie games in my top 10, and that's not like a thing I do because, oh, I got to throw some indie games in there. It's just like last year, I think I only had 2 because it was such a stacked year for the AAA titles, but most years I have 4-ish in there because there's just some of the best video games out there, indie games.
I have played indie games for quite a while now, but I think I remember one of the first ones was like Bastion. You remember, like from Super Giant Games?
Oh yeah, dude, Xbox Live Arcade, man, that was my entry into indie games as well, and life changing. Summer of Arcade was life changing stuff for me.
I remember last year. I'm very grateful that I played and reviewed this game called Season: A Letter to the Future. And I remember like that was like, and I did say that like what Harold Halibut was gonna be for me this year. That was Season was that game for me last year. I couldn't stop talking about it last year, like throughout the whole year, to the point that like the developers got in touch with me, and like they literally sent me from Canada all the way over to Mexico, like a vinyl of the soundtrack. I was, elated, like very grateful that that happened. But the thing is, like beyond that, the Season. I don't know if you've played it, but Season is also one of those games that's like a slow burn, very very thoughtful. It's like the world is ending, and you're like recording things with your like voice recorder and with your camera. Like it's these kinds of games that you don't even think doing that can be a video game.
I remember being intrigued by the game, but last year was just so packed. Almost any game that didn't get amazing, like Harold Halibut type reviews, like I just don't know if I have time. Like Goodbye Volcano High is another one where I was like really interested and then never really dove in last year. But yeah, I mean that's the thing with indie games. It's like I'm playing Death Stranding right now,
Oof.
and that's a AAA game. But I'm like I can't believe that this game got greenlit as a AAA game because it's just such an odd concept. You know, like I'm really enjoying the game, but that just doesn't happen at that kind of level, and that's probably just because of Kojima's background. But with indie games, I mean, they can experiment in all sorts of weird ways. That's what indie games can do. People like I'll see these takes on Twitter, like, oh, video games, they're not experimenting, they're not doing weird things. Everyone's just sticking to the same formula. Well, indie games don't necessarily do that. There's lots of weird ones out there. There's lots of guys doing different things. People complain about games being too long. Well, a lot of indie games are much more manageable experiences. So yeah, I mean that's why they're so bad, and you can just get those kind of unique experiences, like a season that just does something that no one else is doing.
Yeah, I was thinking about this game that just came out, right? I haven't played it, but I've seen some footage and it's hilarious. Another Crafts treasure. Um,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. That's on my radar. I'm picking it up soon.
yeah, I saw the developers say that they were the way they came about this concept is like the Souls like genre if Disney did it, which is like such a funny way to describe it. But it also has some like really raunchy comedy as well, and it's like they really poke fun of themselves like all of the time. Like the marketing pokes fun at the genre, the Souls-like genre, and at itself, which is true that like some video games take themselves too seriously. It's funny that like because indie games are some of them have like really small studios and have like such clear ideas of they want to what they want to do. It's very authentic.
Did you watch the Triple I initiative a few weeks back?
I haven't watched it at all, but I do want to talk about it. I want to talk about
Yeah.
that show and about like the ID at Xbox. I think that like a lot of people, especially on Xbox, I think Game Pass has been doing a lot of great, really great stuff to showcase indies. Like it's too bad like people just want to see like the new Gears of War, but because like if you just give, I remember this game called Archvale. It was like a bullet hell shooter, which is something that like I would have never like bought on Switch, but I gave it a try on Game Pass, and it's co-op, and it's so much fun. It's couch co-op, really well created, just by a group of like three people.
Yeah, I mean, I give Xbox a lot of credit for indies because I mean, like I said, summer of our Xbox Live Arcade, that was kind of my introduction into indies, and now with Game Pass, I mean, it just makes it so it's risk free to try. I mean, like that Harold Halibut, a great example. Like that's
Yeah,
that's
it's on Game Pass.
that that's a risky game to purchase for a lot of people. Just because it is so different. But with Game Pass, it's just all right. Let's make it happen. But yeah, and I was gonna say with the Triple I initiative, like there was a Vampire Survivors trailer, and the whole trailer was pretty much making fun of itself. Like it's just it's fun that they can do that. It's fun. There's like you said, there's some games that take themselves a little too seriously. Like I do think indie games have like an inherent joy that it's tough for most AAA games to have. Even though I still love tons of those games, but just that's one of the
Yeah,
differences.
I agree. And what is very exciting right now is that like you go into the indie space, and when an indie game focuses on a genre, like for example, there was a game last year called Viewfinder, which was one of my most well reviewed games. I loved it because it's a puzzle game, but like you took a picture and then like a Polaroid would come out and create it in another space. It's really mind bending kind of puzzle game, but it was short. It was like 5 hours long, but every single puzzle was very inventive.
Yeah, that concept was crazy. That I played Astral Ascent last year, which is I keep saying like it's the closest thing you're gonna find to a 2D Hades, which is another indie game. But indie games puzzles are obviously interspersed with like a lot of your Zeldas, a lot of those adventure games. But you don't see like a very many AAA Portal 2 type games these days. Indies are the ones that have pretty much taken up that whole genre, the roguelite genre that is like almost not 100%, but like probably what 95% an indie genre at this point. Like if you want to experience certain genres at this point, you almost have to play indie games because those games just aren't getting made at the AAA studios.
I remember the Talos Principle too, which I'm playing now as well. The most clever, the ones that really make you feel like, oh, like that eureka moment, I think that I've really found to be recently on the indie space. Chance of Senar, it's another like language-based puzzle game. There's indie games that like really go beyond what a video game is.
I told you two indie games made my top 10 last year. Chance of Sinar was my number 10.
Wow, really, man? I
Yeah,
didn't know. That's amazing.
yeah, love that game. I mean, that game. I haven't played it, and people have compared it to Chance of Sinar, but Golden Idol. Uh, I think it's Case of the Golden Isle or something like that. It's like a detective game.
I've seen it mentioned, yeah.
And have you played Return of the Obra Dinn?
I know it. I know about
Yeah.
it, but I haven't yet.
So those are all like super open ended. And then there's it was at the Triple I Initiative, this Shadows of Doubt game, which is a like open world detective game, and it basically indie games are the only games that are not holding your hand in that way. Like Chance of Sinar, it's you're trying to decipher a language.
Yeah, literally.
It does not. I mean, it gives you a couple. If you have to explore to find them, it'll give you a few freebies to start. But for the most part, like I think first time I picked up the game, like I screwed up a couple of the opening segments because I was like, oh shoot, like I messed that up. Like it does not hold your hand, but in a good way, in a way like you said that makes you feel smart. So that said, that's another genre that you're just you just don't get to experience unless you're playing indie games. So if you're not playing them, you're just not experiencing all that video games have to offer. Every time anyone complains about modern video games, it's just like brutally apparent that they don't play indie games outside of like maybe your Hades or the really big ones.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I completely agree with you. My God, I think we could talk about about this
Yeah.
specific genre and specific games for hours. But to wrap up, I wanted to ask you, like, what is? I mean, obviously, just one is a very difficult question. I mean, at least for me. But what could be like one or top three indie games that you like really like right now?
Uh, like all time.
Yeah, all time or at the moment, you know.
I'll go all time. I'll say I don't even flinch when I say this one. My favorite indie game of all time is definitely Chained Echoes.
Ooh, wow. Yeah, yeah.
Have you played it?
Yeah, I have. I have.
One of the best turn-based battle systems I've ever played, and there's two of them. There's two different battle systems. Both like take away the grinding. They add. I think a lot of my problem with a lot of modern or just turn-based RPGs in general is you get stuck in that rut where you just have to attack, attack, attack because you don't want to
Right.
waste your MP. You don't want to keep having to use that stuff. So you just kind of mindlessly go through a lot of the battles till you get to a big battle. Not the case with Chained Echoes. Every battle strategy, the story is really crazy. A lot of big time twists. Like, it doesn't have like maybe the most iconic characters, but I just love that game. I love the story. I love the exploration. I love the battle system. So I'll put that at number one.
Nice.
Then I'll say Slay the Spire.
Wow.
That was my 2019 game of the year. And that's what got me into deck builders and all that. I love that game. Number three is harder. I got a bunch there. I guess I'll say Hades. I'll just say Hades. Just I'll be basic, but
Yeah, or Sifu as well. Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
we could go on and on for
yeah,
ages.
yes, we could.
Just gushing about a game, celebrating what it does right, and obviously talking about a bunch of other games, especially indies, because they do need that focus, right? And I'm glad that we're giving it to them. Really, thanks a lot, Weston. BigNerdGaming.com.
Yeah. BigNerdGaming.com or just if you follow me on Twitter, BigNerdGaming. I love to interact with people. I started this because um, all my real life friends are pretty much all sports. That's all we talk about. And I've never had really any people play games, but no one hardcore. So it's been such a blast, like just connecting with people, connecting with someone like you. It's really been the best. I love talking about this stuff, but I've never had anyone to talk about with. So it's been a lot of fun. So thanks so much for having me on. It was a total blast.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Likewise. I mean, we have interacted constantly, but like in this, not in this format. So I'm really glad that we did because there really was clearly a lot to talk about. So thank you for taking the time as well. It's been really fun.